we're talking about giving human beings access to programs and services. So it's important when we talk about the code and the WCAG requirements and scale. Those are all really important terms. Ultimately, our true north is that they're human beings, and we need to have equitable digital properties that make sure that everybody can access our programs and services.
Hi, this is Mike Paciello with AudioEye in our HearSay podcast. I'm with a good friend and colleague, Don Torrez. Don is with CivicPlus. He's director of partnerships there at CivicPlus. And of course, we've got a great business relationship between our two companies. Welcome and good to have you on the show, Don.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So, Don, you and I have been kind of putting our heads together, feeling like we got to give some love out to the clients, especially CP clients in the Title II space, where Title II has recently been passed, and now some deadlines are coming up. Folks in the state, local government, some of the other organizations that are kind of covered by Title II, including education, libraries, courts systems, things like that. People are realizing that the mandate means business, and they need to start taking some action. They're not really clear necessarily where they should be, what they should be doing, what the timelines are. Does that kind of set the table for our discussion today?
Yes, very much so. Our local government leaders are very well aware that they need to do something about accessibility, and they want to do the right thing for the right reason. They just largely don't know where to start.
Yeah. And so that's pretty much what our discussion is going to focus on. I think we're gonna try and talk about Title II, what some of the requirements are there for various organizations. We'll definitely talk about timelines. That's a big thing. I think people feel like they're imminent, and they are, just kind of depending on how big your platform is, whatever your web or your mobile platforms are from that standpoint. We'll also address some of the things that CivicPlus and AudioEye are doing to improve the experience, the user experience, as well as our clients and their engagements and what they can be assured of. We'll also talk a little bit about some of the litigation, the litigious matters that are out there, what that means, what kind of support our organizations provide to our clients. I think it's really second to none industry-wide, and kind of clinches it for a lot of organizations, especially if you're just thinking about should I or shouldn't I go with with the platforms that are being offered. And then finally, one of the things that I want to talk about is again what I said earlier in our discussion is kind of this quadrant 2 thinking. It's about making things that are important, putting them first, and letting the urgency fall behind. We've got plenty of time to get things done and get them done, but we need to get them done right. Otherwise, you're going to end up with more problems, and probably will face some of the backlash of potential legal problems there. So I think that'll carry the bulk of our discussion today. And Don, of course, it's important. You represent, from my perspective, the customer and the clients, right? You know what they're saying, you know what they're feeling, the pain that they're feeling, and we want to try to alleviate a lot of the pain that's going on at that level.
Absolutely.
Cool. So let's talk about Title II, the mandate. How or what is it that you're hearing from your clients in terms of expectations and the mandate? Do they understand it? Do they not understand it? Do they understand that there's web and there's mobile associated with? Tell me how things are in the field at that level.
There's not a lot of understanding about it at this moment. We've talked to lots of local governments, and quite a few of them were not aware that the Department of Justice had even made an announcement. And that was last spring. It's been a year. And so the timelines, 2 years, 3 years, depending on size, we're already 1 year into those. And so speaking with them, the local government leaders know they need to do something. They want to take care of accessibility. They really don't know where to start.
Yeah. And when you say local government leaders, now there's, Title II applies to state, but I think you're really focused more on the municipalities, right? The cities, the townships, if you want to call them the mom and pop shops of government as an entity. So they've got fewer resources and probably even less know-how when it comes to accessibility.
Yeah, CivicPlus, we serve local governments, including city governments, county governments, the departments they're in, special districts, the water districts, police district departments, those sorts of things. We make websites and all resident-facing software. So like Parks and Recreation, for example. And you're exactly right. There's a lot of mandates at the local level, and there's not a lot of funding. They compete for resources like everyone else. And what accessibility represents in something like this is an unfunded mandate where everyone wants to do the right thing and they definitely want to act on accessibility, but there's not a lot of funds available. And it's hard. You spoke about urgency versus importance. Everyone agrees that accessibility is very important. There are so many urgent issues that local governments must deal with that really what the Department of Justice did with their announcement was help move that to the top of the priority list so that local governments could deal with it right away. And so I know it's stressful to deal with, and local governments are dealing with that, but it really has helped us make it a priority and speak about it actively.
And I know you guys are mostly focused on local government entities, but does education play into this? Do the public school systems play into this at all, Don?
It definitely plays into Title II, yes. And so we have some, we
Yeah.
serve some education, mostly K through 12. It's not our primary focus, but we definitely work in that space, and it's has just the same kind of issues with regard to funding and resources that local governments do.
Yeah, just in terms of a use case for folks that are out there, of course there are many states that are very proactive, many local governments and school system, public school systems, including K through 12. The one that comes to my mind is the Prince George's County in Maryland. Very, very proactive. Maryland is very proactive on this. I'm aware of several well-funded projects around ensuring that the education for the K through 12, this is just K through 12 now, not talking about universities or state colleges and things along those lines. K through 12 education projects that they've got going there that are well funded around accessibility, around these Title II mandates specifically. So things can get done, right? But it is, like you said earlier, like we've been talking about, it's a matter of, is this really important? Always with accessibility. And I've been doing this for 45, I hate to say how long it's been, 40, 45 years now. One of the biggest challenges, regardless of whether you're talking about public or private enterprise, or organizations, was convincing them that accessibility needed to be in the top 10 priorities. They just never were. And so what happens is what I think your clients are starting, actually it's your clients, but they're by extension, they're AudioEye clients, they're starting to feel a little bit of that, like you said, that urgency, because it wasn't in their top 10. And now the timeline is moving forward. We're a year into it. They've got another year. Most of them only have another year before they've got to be compliant. And people are getting really nervous about what they can and can't do, especially because it's unfunded.
It is. And what I'll add to that is the Department of Justice, who enforces accessibility policy at the local government level, they drew the line between large government and small organizations at 50,000. And as I talk across the spectrum to local government leaders, 50,000 is not a lot of population. If you talk to the government leaders, they would not consider that to be big government. And so relatively what we would consider to be medium-sized governments are really have much shorter time frames because they've only been given 2 years as opposed to 3. And 2 years has now become 1 year because we're into April of 2025.
Yeah, let's be clear on what those dates are for the organizations that are thinking about this. So if you've got 50,000 or more persons in your government area, county or city, your compliance date is April 26th, 2026. So like you said, that's only a year from now. If you've got less than 50,000, then you've got another year extension on that. That goes to 2027. And there are some special district government organizations that also go out to April 26, 2027. But I think the ones that you're hearing from the most, and rightfully so, are those that are, they're basically doing another year, right?
Yeah. And so a lot of them, the organizations we talk to don't know where that line is. So we're first, informing them that this is coming and where that line is, where the deadline comes, and then additionally telling them how we can help or what they need to do, because that's the next question that comes, is what they need to do for accessibility.
Yeah. So again, we'll just make it clear. So the line really of delineation here is if you've got 50,000 or more residents in your local government setting, then your compliance date is a year from now, April 26th, 2026. If you have less than 50,000, or if you have a special government designation, then your compliance date is 2 years from today, which is April 26, 2027. So those are the lines, those are the markers. That's what you should be building your strategy for in terms of compliance. Let's talk about, well, what is compliance now? What do we mean, by compliance? And maybe what we should do is also talk about who's covered here, just so the folks that are listening in our audience know. So when we talk about ADA Title II compliance and what is covered, what organizations are covered, we're talking about public education, we're talking about transportation, recreation, healthcare, social services, courts, voting, emergency systems, town meetings, and public transit systems. Those are all the areas that are called out in Title II compliance. So again, whatever you're planning, how you're organizing your efforts on your web environments, you need to be sure that all of these entities are covered and their platforms are usable and accessible to people with disabilities. Did I capture all of them correctly,
That's
Don?
right. Yes. And what we're talking about is virtual software, virtual manifestations of these physical spaces. And it's just so
Yeah.
important, included in the mandates, because this means that you don't have to go wait in line physically. You can go do those kinds of things that you were talking about, take advantage of those services, apply for things online. And it's really important that we make those accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. So all the way across the board, all of those entities that we described. Now, let me just help again our audience, because sometimes it gets a little bit more difficult to figure out. Well, where do I go to find this information? So let me give you a URL that our audience can kind of look at. The first is a URL for the ADA. This is the Department of Justice website, their fact sheet, and where you can go. So the URL is www.ada.gov resources /resources / 2024-03-08 web rule, and that will give you what the fact sheet are for the rules around compliance for Title II compliance, web and mobile accessibility. Now that's just a short version, kind of a summary, executive summary, if you will, of what people should be looking at. Now, for the folks in the audience, we'll make sure that we send out those URLs for you, so you know exactly where to go. But I just wanted to state them, and we'll get them into this recording, repeat them in written form for you. But that's an easy place to go to just kind of get a sense of what we should do, the timelines, who's included, et cetera, and so forth. So Don, let's talk a little bit then about what we mean by compliance standards. What should these organizations be looking to? Now, the easiest thing to do is to say both for websites and mobile apps. So that's those are the two platforms we'll say in terms of what the government organizations are being required. Websites and mobile apps, they need to comply with the World Wide Web Consortium's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, version 2.1. So when you look that up on the web, you go to www.w3.org/WCAG, you'll find what those priority guidelines are for version 2.1. So that means you're looking at things, and again, in simple form, a lot of these areas are not really too hard to kind of digest in terms of, well, what kind of content. So, governments the web page or homepage, obviously that needs to be accessible, right? To people who are blind, people who are deaf, people who have mobility disabilities, maybe fine motor control disabilities where they don't necessarily type on a keyboard, but they may speak into a voice interface, and so they're doing their interactions that way. If your website includes videos, those videos need to be sure that they're captioned. That is a requirement. If your website includes forms, then a person with a screen reader or a screen magnifier who interacts again using their keyboard more often than not, then those forms need to be accessible and usable by a person using those technologies. Are there other things that I'm missing? Forms, tables, obviously your color contrast. Things along those lines. Images need to have alternative text. These are typically the most common areas that individuals with disabilities stumble upon, and they're not accessible. Did I miss anything, Don?
Well, you got it. I mean, those are the big ones. I think about use cases. What are you trying to do? And so it's not a matter of just making sure that all of the elements are accessible, but can I fill out a form? And so navigation comes into a play a lot more than you might think about with other websites, because local government, as you said, has a lot of forms. And so just got to be able to navigate those forms. And it's not just about screen reader readiness, although that's a lot of it. So what local government leaders, when I talk to them, they're struggling with is there's 78 criteria in WCAG, as you mentioned, web content accessibility guidelines. And you might correct me, it might be a different number, but there's a lot. And it's difficult as a local government leader to do that. And we really try to focus on making sure that the programs and services are accessible. But that's right, it's forms, it's content, it's being able to view a schedule or calendar of events. All of those sorts of things really need to be done, because people come to local government websites not just to get information, they want to interact with the government. And so there's a lot of doing on our websites.
Yeah, just think about, again, a typical resident use case coming in. They log in. Very likely, they're there for two reasons. They're searching for information about events or requirements or things that the local government has established, um, or it's very likely they're registering for something, right? Or they've got to do their car registrations. They've got to do their animal registrations. They've got to pay their taxes, their local taxes and tax forms. So that's why we keep talking about these common, technically we call them user interface, widgets and objects that you have to interact with. But this is what an average user comes for. They come for information. They're searching for information. So as you said, the navigation schema of a website needs not just to be obvious and usable to a person without a disability. Someone, say, for example, that's looking right at it and said, well, here's the menu, here's another navigation bar. I can see all that. Can a user with a screen reader, for example, get to those things just as easily, through one key click, at that level? So interaction models, interaction design for people with disabilities has got to be something that is a key focus of the designers and developers of the websites that folks have. Now, if they're on a platform, like CivicPlus, how does that work for them?
We build modules that really make it easier for local governments to add their content to. Our software, particularly our websites, are designed to where the user doesn't have to worry about things like structure. They worry about content. And so we build our content management systems on the basis of web content accessibility guidelines fundamentally. And we really work to make sure that those are accessible. There's a lot of things you can do with content, though, that make the website inaccessible, or even your mobile device framework inaccessible. And so we really try to educate there as well. So at Civic Plus, if you're trying to add an element, it's really difficult to add an image or something like that without an alternate tag. We put guardrails in place to really try to guide those users who are creating the website content to do the right thing. And so we're guiding wherever possible. So that's really what we're doing inside of our content management system to help.
Yeah. So would it be accurate to say that, for example, if I'm posting up, an image like you said, maybe some sort of celebration or festival or something, maybe a person's been hired, that the CMS, the content management system, within the CP platform prompts them for alt text.
Yes. And so we're doing that as much as possible in each of those guidelines as well.
Perfect. That's perfect. And you're right. There are 70 something requirements. I can't remember the exact number. What I can remember, what I do know though, and that is again where one of the advantages to the Civic Plus AudioEye relationship, business relationship, is that in the back end, if that accessibility module is subscribed to, if it's part of your CP contract, well then you'll get all of that out of the box. Not only will the AudioEye platform that complements what CP has put up there in your CMS. Make sure that these things are accessible. It goes through and it provides a continuous monitoring system that monitors. So if you do put up new content and maybe go outside of those guardrails that have already been, set in there by CP's platform, that will be caught by the AudioEye monitoring system and will be remediated on the fly. So that makes it much easier. Again, I guess it gives users and residents, more importantly, the government agencies themselves, a little peace of mind that if they've done something wrong, it's going to get caught and get fixed and get remediated right away.
Yes, accessibility is still top of mind for our clients and the local governments we work with. So at Civic Plus, we're working hard to make sure that out of the box, those websites are as accessible as they can be. And the local governments we work with are working hard to make sure their practices are accessible in the original creation. So we don't add AudioEye so that we don't have to think about accessibility. We add AudioEye because it's the thing that puts us over the top and ensures that we have the accessibility of the things that we might not catch. So AudioEye is not a substitute for an accessibility plan. It is really the thing that makes it the best that the accessibility program and plan can be.
Yeah, excellent. I love the way how you stated that, Don. And that is exactly the way we feel, in terms of what we're providing for our clients, for Civic Plus, and of course in turn for your clients. We want them to feel, again, like I said, that peace of mind, that guarantee that what they are building, we're going to ensure that it's usable and accessible to people with disabilities, that it meets those WCAG requirements, because that's what Title II requires. Very simple. Title II points to the WCAG requirements 2.1 as the standards by which the technical standards by which anyone that develops a digital environment, a web and software environment. And we don't want to forget, because I keep missing this from our conversation, but those mobile apps too, which are a little bit more tricky, especially for a person with a disability to use. So that interaction model and the accessibility of it is also very critical.
It is. And when we first started with AudioEye, the thing that we really appreciated, the process that AudioEye uses to verify accessibility and ensure that it's in place is fantastic and second to none. But you can go on the page of every page of the website and find a certification that says this website has been tested for WCAG compliance, and it spells out your process. And that's really helpful because on each page of the website, you're able to see that it's been verified, and there's just really no one else in the industry doing that.
I think the other thing too, as you recall, if, for example, you are a user or you're a government employee and you find an error, that we have a built-in error reporting system so that you just one-click it, put out what the error is. We go and we research that. Hopefully we could create an automated fix or enhancement. I don't like the word fix. It sounds like it just has this negative connotation. I like the word enhancement.
Yeah.
Right. So we implement that enhancement, and things are back up to stuff and working well.
And that process is great as well, where I can go through the AudioEye tool and I can I can send an idea or a question that I have directly to AudioEye. Local government leaders,
Right.
they're wearing a lot of hats. They're not able to answer all of the accessibility questions, but the resident or the user who's using the website can ask a question about accessibility or maybe an obstacle that they've encountered directly and have an accessibility expert respond to that on behalf of the local government that we work with.
Yeah, let's underscore that word expert. These are not people that are just, working as subcontractors off the side because this is a hobby of theirs. These are individuals whose lives have been devoted to accessibility at a very deep level technologically. And frankly, many of our folks here at AudioEye are individuals with disabilities themselves. So what they're doing for you is what they would be doing for themselves. And I just don't see that as being a better value proposition than that.
I agree. I agree. And the local governments we're speaking about, they don't have the staff to hire accessibility experts to be available 24 hours a day. And because of AudioEye's scale and the expertise that you have, you're able to do that. And that's a value that, like I say, no one else is offering.
Yeah, of course, one of the reasons why I came here was exactly for that word that you just said, scale, because scale now for us is as important as almost anything we've ever done in the accessibility field. We've got to be able to scale with enterprise level organizations, with large organizations, large digital implementations, whether they're whether they're web or whether they're mobile. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to have to use automation to do that. And that's why we put so much, we here at AudioEye have invested so much in automation, in AI, and in the assurance, the warranty insurance that we provide for our clients. Now, do we want to talk about that, Don, a little bit about if in fact you're an organization that maybe is facing some sort of litigation or complaint, and how that works between the client, CP, and AudioEye?
I do, and we've experienced that. Now, our websites by themselves, they're not problematic. I don't want to give the listener that idea. But what happens is, we've seen in a city, for example, and this actually happens, the city had problems with physical space, and the Department of Justice investigated. And so when the DOJ investigates, they will widen the scope. And now your website is being investigated, even though no one had a complaint about the website. Now, at that point, we have a lot of questions. And when I was involved in the Department of Justice investigation, it meant 2 calls per week to talk about what you're doing for accessibility, which is a huge time burden. But you bring in AudioEye, and that's just really helpful because now you have somebody who, as you say, has scale, but also has the expertise to talk to a governing body, whether that's the Department of Justice or Office of Civil Rights, or an attorney who might have sent a letter. And that's something, again, a small town doesn't have. And I know scale sounds like a business term, and it is, but what it means for a small town is they have access to that type of expertise and the bandwidth of the expert that they could never afford otherwise. And so that's what they're getting with AudioEye. So yeah, I mean, I've seen the DOJ investigations, Office of Civil Rights, or lawsuits where AudioEye will come to bat and speak on behalf of what they've done for accessibility, and it really has alleviated a lot of problems.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that out. And one of the things that I talk a lot about here amongst our team is walking our talk. So if we're going to go out there, we're going to build, technology. We want to walk our talk. We want to back up what we say, and we come there again in support of our clients, support you. We'll literally go through a line by line, review and analysis of whatever the complaint might be, or if it's more than one, we'll go through it. We'll provide a detailed response. We'll test everything just to make sure that, that we're at it. But it's a rare, very rare situation where we run into something that we're not able to handle right away immediately.
And these situations are rare. I do want to point that out. I think that having a solution like AudioEye on the website and the certifications on the pages really prevent it. So I think that we see a lot less of that kind of litigious activity because there is assurance on the website. And so the reason I say it that way is because you get legal assurance through AudioEye, and with the AudioEye value, you probably won't and hopefully will never need it. But if you do, it's in place.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Don, let's spend the next 10 minutes. We got about 10 minutes left here in our webcast, podcast rather, though, in talking a little bit. Okay, so I'm an organization, I'm a local government, small or large. What's the process how do I get started? What should I do? I mean, I could call Don and, maybe I'll get 100 ADA okay, type of a thing. Or I can really start to plan and think about this a little bit more as an organization. So I'm going to give you a couple of steps that I would recommend that every organization follow through. Just let me know how you feel about that, if that
Yeah.
makes sense, especially for your clients. So the first thing, really, you should have a clear understanding of what the the Department of Justice Title II mandate means and what it calls for in terms of requirements on the web and mobile. Does that sound right for number one?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Number two, then once you have a clear understanding, then you've got to go figure out, well, where are we? Where are we in terms of an organization? What do our websites look like? How do they work, and how do they react from an accessibility standpoint on a mobile environment? So I recommend doing a vulnerability assessment, right? Try to get your thumb in the air and get some idea of what kind of issues that you may be dealing with. So perform a vulnerability assessment is number two, and we can help you to do that.
Yes. Very much. And it's important that local government leaders have an opinion on what their website looks like. It prevents, there's there's a lot of products out there where somebody will call one of our local government leaders and say, I see that there's a ton of accessibility issues on your website. You better watch out. So if you've already done the assessment you talk about and you have an opinion of how your website looks, then it kind of weeds out what is true versus what you know not to be true.
Yeah, let me tell you something else that a vulnerability assessment will probably true out very quickly, and that is, as we know, a lot of organizations have third-party widgets and third-party, content, applications that are built into the website. So right away, it'll suss out those applications that may be problematic for users as well. That allows you as an organization now to get that feedback back to that third party, right? To kind of move the needle in terms of compliance. So it's not just you, it's your partners, it's your channels that are working with you.
That's right. And it's really the proof is there. And I mean, I really like the way that that's how you started this step of the process.
Yeah. Now, the third piece is probably the one that takes a little bit more time, definitely a lot more thinking, and that is pulling together a strategic and executable plan, right, in terms of dealing with what you have now as an organization with your platforms. There are a lot of ways to tackle that. People have all different kinds of priorities, and so that is not something we can necessarily say you should do it this way or do it that way, or it's black and white. It's not. It's your organizational priorities. It is your responsibilities that you have to your residents, right, and to those that are interacting with your sites. Because in some cases, I imagine that state, local governments, certainly some of these public offices, they've got out of state residents, if you will, users who are interacting with their state too. So they've got to kind of put some notion of a strategic, prioritized plan, and then at that point start to roll out that plan and execute on it. And again, Civic Plus and AudioEye are here to help you work on that. We're more than happy to engage with you and help you to figure out what should you prioritize, how to get through this thing, how to leverage your internal resources, how to leverage your resources that you have with CP and with AudioEye at that level. Did I miss anything in terms of that third step, right? Strategize and then execute. Now, I should have mentioned one other thing. Execute against what? Well, execute against the plan, but also execute against that timeline.
No, I don't think you missed anything. I will elaborate a bit though and say that there's two really huge variables. One is where you are. We know some local governments that haven't redesigned their websites in 4 or 5 years. You are probably well behind on technology and have a lot further to go than others. And the second thing is, what does your community look like? It's a very personal plan that you have to develop an assessment because I know that there's a lot out there. You can get a cookie cutter accessibility plan, and that just won't work. I'm sitting here in very rural Kansas, but I'm about 6.5 miles away from the Kansas School for the Deaf. So it's really common to walk into a retail establishment like a McDonald's or a Walmart and see someone that knows American Sign Language. It's in every retail place that we go because the population, there's a strong hearing impaired population around here who attends or has family members that attend the school. And so my community doesn't look like yours. And so my accessibility plan and the content on my website won't look like yours either. So it's really important that you do the assessment that you talked about, Mike, and just get really specific about my community and what my needs are, which will be different for every community. And so when you start to think about it that way with the human component in mind, it takes on this brand new dimension of really taking a deep assessment of where you are.
Yeah, that's excellent, Don. And I definitely really appreciate your point about personalizing your web and mobile properties in terms of what is a priority for your residents, for your citizens that are there that you need to serve. It may be that you have like you have there in Kansas a larger population of individuals who have hearing disabilities, whether they're deaf or whether they have low hearing, that wearing hearing aids. You know, I'm probably more likely then to start making more decisions around, can I make sure that every video on my web environment is captioned? And when we're doing live sessions, can we make sure that we have live caption? Because there's an awful lot of programs there that will allow you to do that. So that is a wonderful, a great point to highlight there. I will tell you, it wasn't long ago. I can remember when working with communities of individuals with hearing disabilities. Like I worked very closely with Gallaudet for many, many years. They don't consider themselves as individuals with disabilities, but the WCAG requirements call that out to ensure, because they still are users, and they're users who have a fundamental need, right? And so to enhance enhance your digital properties in a way that is usable and accessible to all persons with disabilities is really something that's going to be part of that strategic plan.
That's right. This is ultimately, we're talking about giving human beings access to programs and services. So it's important when we talk
Yeah.
about the code and the WCAG requirements and scale. Those are all really important terms. Ultimately, our true north is that they're human beings, and we need to have equitable digital properties that make sure that everybody can access our programs and services.
Yeah, let's make no mistake about it. I think you said, and I think you alluded to it earlier. In the old days, ADA was about brick and mortar,
Yeah,
right? So it was about architectural design. In fact, actually, the organization, the Access Board, that is really where the rooted acronym comes in, out of the architectural board, barrier and board accessibility. But we live less in a brick and mortar environment in terms of day-to-day interactions, and more in a digital society. So I've always felt very strongly that one of the pundits, digital pundits of the world, is someone that I follow very closely, is Ram Sharani. Has a long history in high tech and emerging technology, and he wrote a book recently on the new digital competitive advantage. And what I found most interesting in his vision is what he called a highly personalized user experience. That's what accessibility is all about. It's about a personalized user experience. Now, it may be more personalized in terms of, assistive technologies that are used by people with disabilities, but the reality is it's still a very personalized experience for every user. So I think that's where we're going. I think that's why you saw the Department of Justice take more seriously what it means to be accessible, and requiring it of themselves first and foremost. And not too far down the pipe will be the private entities, or typical industry requirements around that. So this is something, again, to think about strategically as you execute upon your own accessibility plans.
that's right. This is all a journey towards accessibility. I don't know that we're going to get to 100% of what we'd like to be to, but we just want to make sure that people can access our programs and services. And so it's important to start with a really good website, have an accessibility plan in place that fits your city uniquely. And AudioEye really, and I said this the last time we spoke, is firing the winning shot. AudioEye really is an important part of a complete accessibility program.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you again, Don. We appreciate that. And of course, it works in very close collaboration with what CivicPlus is producing for their platforms and for your clients, which is just an absolute important. It is really, when you think about it, this part of the ADA was written specifically for CivicPlus clientele and the state and local governments and the entities that are associated with them. So could be better timing. But again, we just remind the audience, if you've got 50,000 or more individuals within your county, within your region, within your government sector, you've got a year. You got a year. So start thinking about what is important. So I want to just go off just a little bit. I get on my soapbox every now and then.
I do too.
Talk about quadrant 2, what I call quadrant 2 thinking, right? And that is importance over urgency. Very typically, I've seen this, and I know you've seen it over and over and over again. What happens is everybody waits till the last minute to get things done. And suddenly urgency takes over things that are important, and mistakes are made all the way across the board. Now, it's true that the CivicPlus and AudioEye platform and where accessibility is concerned, we've got your backs in a lot of ways, but still the onus is on you. If you wait until March of next year, frankly speaking, if you wait until next year, any later than now, you're going to find yourself scrambling, especially those organizations that aren't well funded or maybe limited to maybe one IT person in the entire organization. So start this plan now. Figure out, like we said before, understand the requirements, do a vulnerability assessment, and start that plan now and get it implemented as soon as possible. That's quadrant 2, putting importance over urgency.
That's right. Well said. And I think that doing so could make this less of a fire drill and more of a plan where you can carefully plot out what you're doing and do this really fundamentally well.
Yeah. Thank you, Don. So last words of wisdom from your standpoint. Again, we're speaking to this, the CivicPlus clients that are out there that are listening to this podcast. What are your last words of wisdom, pearls there? I'm looking for, Don.
I would say think holistically. I mean, think about how your government is unique and really approach accessibility from that standpoint. But get started today. I mean, if you get started today, I wouldn't say there's plenty of time, but there's definitely time to think this through and do it fundamentally correctly. So that's what I would say is think about your town and how unique it is and develop an accessibility plan that really works for your community.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Well said, Don. And let me just add, and I think I've said this a couple of times, we've got your back. CivicPlus and AudioEye, we're here to help. We'll help not just technologically, but we'll help with the legal understanding and what the mandates are, what the standards are at that level. We've got the training built into our environment, so you'll have that. But we've got your back. Please feel free, by all means, to reach out, call us. We'll work together with you. Of course, your first line of contact will be Don and the CivicPlus team, and then, as Don knows, the AudioEye team and our experts will be right there to back him up.
That's right, and we appreciate that.
Excellent. Well, Don, it's been great talking to you again. I know we've got a couple other events coming up, some webinars, so we might just inform the audience that watch for announcements from both AudioEye and from CivicPlus on upcoming webinars and podcasts that we'll be doing, but reach out to us. And again, Don, thanks so much for spending some time with me here on AudioEye's HearSay podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. This is Mike Paciello from AudioEye, Chief Accessibility Officer, signing off and looking forward to talking accessibility with you again. HearSay is produced by Sojin Rank, Mike Barton, Mariella, Paulino, and Missy Jensen. Edited by Alex Dorrier. If you enjoyed this podcast and don't want to miss future episodes, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.